feature episode, we have a wonderful professor from the politics department joining us. This professor has a PhD from the University of California, Los Angeles, with graduate training at MIT and Harvard. His research and teaching focuses on the military, race, immigration, war, and U.S. foreign policy. He has dedicated his career to advancing policies that promote civic engagement, educational equity, social justice, and immigration rights. In 2022, he was awarded with Latinx Faculty Member of the Year by the students and is currently working on a book manuscript titled The Few, the Proud, the Deported, Race, Military Service, and the Politics of Immigration Enforcement. Please join me in welcoming Professor Marco Durazo.
Yay! Thank you, Professor. Thank you for joining us.
Of course, thank you.
You want?
Yes, no. Okay, so we just have a few questions for you today. Hopefully everything in that intro was correct about you. Yeah. But first, we just wanted to start off getting to know you a little bit more. So what initially drew you to political science, and how did your personal or academic background shape your research interests?
Yeah, so thanks for the opportunity to connect with you. It's always good to see you. Nice to meet you as well. It's always good to talk to students about these things. So originally I'm from San Diego. My stepfather was in the military for 30 years. So we moved around a lot. When I tell everybody from kindergarten to 6th grade, I went to like 5 different schools. I was born in Texas, and then because of the military, we went to Kentucky, then Ohio, then back to Texas, and then he finally retired in San Diego, and that's kind of where I grew up. The reason it's important, and I tell about growing up in San Diego, a couple dynamics. Like San Diego is probably one of the biggest military towns in the United States. Almost, other than I think the Air Force, every branch of the military is represented, right? In the Navy, the Marines. It's one of the biggest military towns, if not the biggest in the United States. So that was always kind of part of my life, and then given my stepdad's kind of career. We also have the international border, right? Yeah. So we have La Frontera with, Tijuana and Mexico. So, you think about that setup, right? The military town, military industrial complex, high level degree of patriotism because the military is there. And then you have the politics of immigration, the international border, which is always political, especially now. You always have these questions about, who's a member, who's not a member, illegality. It's always a hot button issue there. Right now, with current administration, it seems like it's in the news every single day. But when you grow up with the border in your backyard, it's always political. So growing up, I was always interested in things about the military. The politics of immigration were always front and center. And then I was always interested in how Latinos, like what was our racial identity? We're not, obviously, some people disagree, we're not white, right? We're not treated as white folks, right? We're racialized in different ways, but like our racial experience is qualitatively different than that of, say, African Americans. So I was always trying to navigate, like, what is our racial identity? Like, how does it play out politically? How is it different than the experience of Black folks? How is it different than the experience of European Americans, which were not necessarily treated that way? And like, what's its relationship with like the military and immigration? And a lot of people forget, in the 90s was a moment of like political socialization for a lot of Latinos, because everybody looks at what Trump's doing right now and they think it's so unique, and how dare he do that? He's just copying the playbook, right? The governor of California in the 90s, Pete Wilson, literally in a Democratic state became a Republican governor and he was reelected, and he ran on the anti-immigration, right? He was like, they're draining resources, they're criminal, they're not paying taxes, and then he passed legislation to deny them schooling, deny them health care, to criminalize their presence in California, and then that kind of culminated in Proposition 187. And then the political socialization for a lot of Latinos who were in high school, like myself, is that we walked out of school, right, in protest of the legislation. And it was really good because I told my mom what was going to happen, and I told her we're probably going to get suspended. And then she's like, walk out, right? And, you know, like, no problem with the suspension. I got 2-day suspension. But it was like a political moment for a lot of young Latinos on this is wrong, they're scapegoating our community, and I'm not okay with it. Right. So all those dynamics, like I didn't realize that I didn't think about being a professor, but I was socialized with the military industrial complex, like international migration and the politics of immigration. I was always just kind of inherently interested in like race. So those are the things I'm growing up in. And you think about these moments, and then when I went to college, I'm like, I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what the project will be, but I want to bring them together in one way. I didn't know about the deported veterans wasn't the issue at that moment. I didn't know that I wanted to study Latinos in the military, although I was interested in it. But I wanted to do academic work in that space somehow. And that's kind of what brought me to kind of that research. And I think for like a lot of folks, other professors that you talk to, it's really about like where they grew up, where they were socialized, those experiences, whether they be foreign or domestic, that really set the research agenda for them, right, without them knowing, you know. So that's where I'm from, and that's kind of the things that motivated me to kind of be politically inclined. And then the last thing I'll tell you about being a professor, I don't know about that part yet, but I had to like see other Latinos who were faculty, and then I think that motivated me to
become a professor.
Yeah, I had to see it, right? It's a representation thing.
Did you have a lot of Latino professors?
No. So in high school, no, really not a lot of teachers. And then when I went to I started at junior college in San Diego. We had a history professor who had been there for a while. He wasn't the nicest guy. So like, I'm not gonna say like, oh man, he was a mentor. He's a little difficult to connect with. But he in the classroom, at that moment, and I still think I thought he was quite brilliant. Una cosa que me gustó and that I was super impressed with, I would sit in the front row, and then he would memorize all the lectures. So different styles, like that's you know, other folks look at their notes and their slides. People prepare differently. There's different pedagogies on how you teach. But I remember with history, and you know, you're trying to remember the facts and all the numbers and all the context. And then he would come in and lecture. He se la pasaba caminando through the aisles and just playing the lecture. Maybe because he had done it a long time, but to me it was impressive. And I always felt like I kind of want to be like that. You know, I do move around where students are like, why is he standing next to me? And I'm not looking at what you're doing. No me gusta a veces, like I don't like to stand in front. Like me gusta platicar y caminar, but with the lecture. And then you would ask a question, he would pause and answer your question, like pause the record, and he would answer the question and then push play, and then the lecture would continue. Pero lo tenía, I just thought it was impressive. And then it was funny because in the fall, I gave a lecture here at USF on the dissertation, but it was to a different group. It was like a extended learning, and then it was folks que están retirados that want to continue to learn and be part of lectures, so they're not students. And son más grandes. And I put up the lecture, and I hit the PowerPoint, and a veces, tú sabes, me gusta mover and then look at the slide with you, so I'm not in the front. And then one of the, como decimos de cariño, one of the viejitos, she's like, raises his hand, and I'm like, it's too early for questions, man, but can you stand right here? And I was like, my inner voice was like, no. Pero I went and me moví enfrente. But anyways, I saw the Latino prof. I liked his style, and I remember sitting there thinking, I like learning, and I kind of want to do that. But it wasn't all rosy. Like it was hard to connect with a little bit. Se hace otra cosa. I thought like you gotta be engaging. You gotta be. It's hard for sometimes first generation Latino students to build those relationships. Don't make it more difficult. Don't be standoffish. Follow up with them. Be reachable. And he was at a different place in time, but it was hard to connect with them, you know. And I just feel like you also learn. You see professors on what you like and what you wanna model. Pero a veces la vida y con tu trabajo or professors, you'll see things that are not so cool where you're like, I want to do that different.
Mm-hmm.
And that I feel like that was a lesson with people like that. I liked how you taught. I didn't like the one-on-one engagement. I just thought you got to be a little more warm to some of our students porque they don't have a lot of folks that necessarily are excited to see them.
Yeah.
So you have to be open. You know, you can't. I remember going to office hours and they're like, you know how they probably told you, go build a relationship. Habla con ellos, get to know them. And I'm like, what do I say? But you gotta go. So don't make it hard.
Yeah.
So sometimes students come in and I'm like, where are you from? De donde eres? Have a seat. But I went into office hours and some of the profs are like, I had a, all awkward. Oh, I had a question about like, and they're like, yeah. And then they answered it and then like they wanted me to leave. And I'm like you gotta be, you know, if somebody comes to your home, you can't be like that. You have to be inviting, you have to be warm, you have to help them feel confident and approach other professors.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I grew up. That's kind of what, you know, the academic inclinations that I had. And then I think seeing professors of color was really helped me to make my mind up that kind of that's what I wanted to do.
It's really interesting that you bring up like seeing other Latino professors was like a big motivating factor, but I wanted to ask if it was also like on the contrary to that, another motivating factor to not see that many Latino professors, because there's only, I don't know, I was actually researching this the other day that there's only like between 25 to 30% of Latinos in the US that are in higher education. And so like, what is it like being a part of that 30%? And you know, like other students, right now you're in that position where other students are going to see you and be inspired to pursue, you know, degrees in higher education. And that's a really big role, you know, especially for being a Latino student or Latina student. So I don't know, how was that? Because you say seeing those professors in those roles inspired you a lot, but what do you think? Do you think there's like a responsibility or a duty to carry that out?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So a couple things. And, you know, I was just talking to my wife about this. So one of the things I like about politics and political science, I like politics, you know, why politics and not ethnic studies or history or otras cosas. I love, me encanta when KTVU or the Chronicle says, hey, we're looking for an opinion on this, and would you like to get interviewed for it, whatever it may be. I feel like those opportunities come more because of politics than ethnic studies or history. Like I've had a couple of times where, and their deadlines are really tight. So they're like, I remember in the fall, I was here and I had a class at 1:00, and then you know, KTVU emails me, oh, we want to go on the air, whatever, in an hour, and I'm like, I can't. Like I have class. I'm like, I can't blow off my class. But the reason I bring that up, and I was just talking to my wife about this, I happened to be looking at, I couldn't believe it, exactly to your point, and I did this a couple days ago. I went to UC Berkeley and I looked at political science faculty. And as far as I can tell, they don't have one Latina political scientist.
Oh, wow.
I went to Stanford, political science. And these are both top-rated political science programs. I couldn't find one Latina political scientist. Right? You go to USF, and you're looking at it. So le dije a mi esposa, when I'm a journalist and I'm looking for expert opinion on something specific to Latinos, and I'm looking for an expert, I'm the one that comes up. So it's not flattering, but what's going on? In 2025, in the Bay Area, this is not Arkansas. You're looking at it. That's why they come to me, and I'm like, because they probably go to Berkeley, nada. They probably go to Stanford, nada. They go to USF, we found one in the Bay Area. So that's confusing, that's disappointing, and I mean, it's not that I don't understand why, but that's just what it is. Otra cosa is, I think that, you know, one of the you've heard this. I'm in class and I'm teaching class, and students are, you know, raising issues about, you know, why don't we read this other literature, or how come there's not additional literature about this experience, or Metzley is saying, how come there's not more political science data on the voting behavior of, you know, Salvadoran Americans in Los Angeles, and I'm like, because the research is not going to produce itself. Y'all want to go to law school? I'm happy to support you. Y'all want to go to different professional schools? Good, I'm happy to support you. But the thing is that we need people to do the research. And you need to be a PhD, you need to be in academia to produce the research that you acknowledge doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So that burden is also for the students, right? And that's something that was told to me. You know, that's the saying, if you want to read a book and it doesn't exist, then you write it. That's the one on deported veterans. And I tell my wife, I do it for academic reasons, I do it for professional reasons, but in a way, I don't feel que my life is complete y no me quiero ir de este mundo without writing that book.
Yeah.
I feel I have to write it.
Yeah.
So there is a lack of representation. It's demoralizing because I literally looked a couple of days ago and I thought, no wonder KTUU looks for Marco, because there's nobody at Stanford and Berkeley who can speak to the politics. I also tell students the obligation you have is you have to help fill that pipeline. You can't demand the research when you yourself are saying it's a very noble thing to go to law school. But to be like, well, there's not enough research in Latinos, but you're running off to go study the law and then you're leaving us to try to do all that research. We need the people to do the research. And then the third piece is that I remember, you know, this is why I get really excited for students is like, I think in certain ways, like your life is preordained, right? And I think that you want certain things, and I feel that like the things are already decided for you, and that you just have to kind of navigate and figure out what they are. I saw this professor at junior college who was cool, but it was kind of hard to connect with, but I loved what he did. And then when I transferred, my first choice was Berkeley because I wanted to do political science. And then I wanted to leave SoCal, and then I applied UCLA, but it was my second choice. I really, really wanted Berkeley. I liked the Bay Area. I was from SoCal. I liked the whole history of Berkeley. I came out of junior college with like a 3.9. So even my counselor's like, it shouldn't be a problem, right? And I was like, cool. I visited with some friends the month before the admission deadline. The admission letters went out. And then I was so sure I was going to get in, dude. Like, I was so confident. We went to Berkeley. We walked around. Me encantó. We went to, they weren't applying that year. We went to the student store, and then they bought, like, a sweater and a shirt. And then they're like, Marco, no vas a comprar nada. And I'm like, nah, I'm going to go here for what? And then a month later, what happened? Got the rejection from Berkeley, and then the admission from UCLA. So it's not a bad thing. So I went to UCLA. I had other UC offers, but I went to UCLA. And then, long story short, I wanted to do a thesis, right? And then at UCLA is diferente, where it's huge. Like, you know, I just told you the intro politics at USF is 40 students, 20 to 1, 2 full-time prof. My intro at UCLA had 300 with 6 TAs. Y un profesor that don't talk to me. Like, hey, prof, whatever, go see the TA. Like, before you even finish the sentence, it's like, why are you talking to me, right? It's not that they're a superstar, but there's like, dude, there's 6 TAs for you. ¿Por qué me estás hablando? So you have to learn, if you go to a place like UCLA, that's just what it is. So I wanted to do the thesis, and I had this idea, and then I was like, not a lot of support. I'm like, so how do I get an advisor? Go ask people. I was like, what does that mean, dude? Like, okay. So I emailed folks, y fui a verlos. Some didn't email back, and then a couple I went and met with them, and they passed. I'm too busy, it's not my thing, etc., etc. And then I was a little demoralized, and I was thinking about not doing it. And then me dijeron, you need to go see a professor that just got hired, and se llama Mark Sawyer. And I thought he was white, right? Like, and I'm like, what? How come I don't know who this is? He's new. He just got hired, right? And I don't know why somebody told me you have to go see him. And I was like, that's my last shot, and si no, ni modo, right? So I went on the website, and I figured out he was a black political scientist. And then I emailed him, and me contestó, come tomorrow at 11, my office hour. I'm like, okay, I'll come. And then I went, and then it was so weird, because he was like real friendly, and real inviting, and we started platicando. And you know, when you're not used to people saying, where are you from, and, you know, what do you study? And I'm thinking, why is he asking me all this stuff about myself? Because most of the profs don't. And then I started telling them, I have this project and I'm looking for an advisor. It's about Nicaragua and the Sandinistas and whatever. And then he like started getting excited. And then I was like the voice in my head, it was like, is he being genuine right now? Because it's not all that exciting. I think it's exciting, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But he was excited, and he was like, that sounds like a great project, man. Yeah, really, I could see it. And then I was like, he's like, so what do you need from me? And then I like pulled out the form, and then I thought, ahorita es cuando me va a decir I'm too busy though. And I go, oh, I need the signature. Me agarra la forma. Here you go. Y me lo dio. And then working with him, we did the thesis. And at that time, I was thinking about law school también, because I think for Latinos, we think law school is it's a worthwhile thing. I have plenty of my students que fueron a la
Going to law
escuela.
school.
I have students that are lawyers. He was telling me, you ever think of the graduate program, PhD? And I'm like, oh, a little bit. So he like mentored me, and then he told me, I'm gonna enroll you in my graduate class, just so you can be around the grad students, so you can hear como presentan todo, whatever. And then it was because of him at UCLA that I went and did the PhD, and I went to graduate school. I got an email one time from MIT, and then they were like, hey, we have an open house. We would like to invite you to the open house. We're gonna fly you out from LA. We're gonna put you in a hotel. We want to introduce a department to you. And I was like, wow, ¿de dónde vino este email, right? And I was like, so I said yes. And then I went to see him, and I'm like, hey, I got invited to MIT, man. They're gonna fly me out, whatever. That's crazy, right? And he's like, how do you think your name got there, man? I gave him your name. Yo le dije, invita a estos estudiantes. So it was because of him that he's like, I have this 2 students, Marco and another student, that I think would be great for you to fly out. But he's the one que me abrió esa puerta. So I guess I bring up that story, and I can go on, is that I didn't want to go to UCLA, but I went. Number one, conocí mi esposa allí, so number one. But number 2, you meet people que te cambian la vida, and it was all preordained. I was never going to get into Berkeley. I could have had a 7.0, man, and it wasn't for me in ese tiempo. As disappointed as I was, and I feel like UCLA is not a second choice. Right now, I think UCLA is higher ranked.
Yes.
But at that time, it was Berkeley.
Yes.
But I remember being disappointed, and I feel when you're young, la vida, you think it hurts you because you don't get the things you want, and you're disappointed and no entiendes because you feel that it's disrupting what your plan is. But la plan ya está hecha. And I went and I met him, and me cambió la vida, and I ended up doing the PhD, and I don't know if my life right now would be the same if I had gone to Berkeley. It's just odd.
Yeah.
But when you're young, no, it's hard to understand it at any age, but especialmente when you're 19, 20 years old, no entiendes, right? So I told my wife, man, how different my life would have been if I had never gone to UCLA and never met him. Like, I don't know. I don't know if I would be a political scientist right now. It was because of him. But it had to happen with the disappointment. Que no me aceptaron, which I was really disappointed. Like, I called, I was going to appeal it. Like, I was like, there's a mistake here. And then even the person was like, yeah, man, I don't know what happened here. Like, you should have been admitted. And then I didn't appeal it because they told me, coming from San Diego, I was concerned about housing. And they go, just know that if you appeal it, whatever happens, you're not eligible for university housing anymore. Those things are gone. So you have to come, and right now it's not a big deal to get a room, but when first time you're leaving home and to come from San Diego to the Bay, I'm like, how does that even work? I'm good. So I didn't even appeal it. I just accepted it. So yeah, I ended up at UCLA, and then that's how I ended up a political scientist. Pero es porque me abrió la puerta and supported the research I was doing, and was excited about it, and was willing to put my name out there and open doors for me. That's the only reason I went to MIT, is because he set it up, and I didn't even connect it. I go, hey man, me invitaron a MIT, what do you think about that? And he's like, ¿por qué crees que te invitaron? So anyway, that's growing up. But the answer there is that he would also be like, one of his main things was, how do I develop more political scientists of color? Black, brown, Latina, male, female. And he's passed away, era Afroamericano, su esposa era Latina. And one of his main things was mentoring the black and brown students to turn them into PhDs, because the discipline no tiene. 20 years later, it doesn't look better. Like, really, like in the Bay Area, I'm the only political scientist.
Yeah.
Take a look at it, si quieres. Like, literally, from university level, I think in the Bay Area, if you look at the main institutions, USF, Stanford, Berkeley, I am the only Latino political scientist in the Bay Area. Es increíble.
Yeah.
And I don't say that because I think I'm special. It's actually really sad.
It's
It's sad. Porque there's not a Latina at Berkeley that you can say, hey, we're going to do an interview. We talked to Professor Durazo. We'd like to get your perspective on Trump and the executive orders. Just Marco. Like, increíble.
Wow.
Like, what's up with that?
Do you feel pressure to like link with more Latino students to like for them to be more engaged in like doing this kind of research?
Yeah, well, mira, la cosa es it's a hard thing because a lot of people knock the PhDs. They take time to get.
Yes.
It's financially difficult, but all of that is true for first generation students. Law school, you're not making money, you're in debt. Do I take on the debt? Do I help my family, or do I go to law school for another 3 years? The PhD, do I go get in debt, or I need to help my family? The thing is that like law school and PhDs, there's multi-generational advantages that we don't have. Like when I went into the PhD program at UCLA, there was second, third generation PhDs in my cohort. There's professors here at USF who's many of them, their parents are professors. And not just professors, like there's people at USF whose parents are like renowned academics, like renowned. So it's not like, oh, they just happen to teach at Michigan. Like, no, they were at Michigan for 30 years and they're known for setting up the discipline. So those are the folks, and you think of all the advantages that entails. Financial, the imposter syndrome that a lot of Latinos have. When you're a third generation PhD, you're like, no, I'm born for this. I'm born for it. I'll figure it out. When you're a first generation, you're like, am I born for this? Am I gonna figure it out? When mom and dad are telling you, this is exactly how to talk to the prof. This is exactly what you say in your application. Let me send you my dissertation para que veas how I did it. Those are huge advantages that some of us question. We're like, so those are the challenges and the advantages that some folks have. And then you think about when I encourage young people, some people are like, oh, don't encourage them to do the PhD. And I'm like, I don't think that's right. I think it's going to be hard, but law school tampoco no es fácil. Medical school no es fácil.
Yeah.
And I think, how I think about what I do now and the work that my mom does y lo que me pagan para estar aquí. And I think it's cool. I'm not, my mom trabajó mucho. I tell everybody respectfully, pushing a mop and a broom. And aquí me están pagando buen dinero to talk about, give my ideas about books, to meet with students, to come and go as I please. Oh, I'm not even on campus, dude. I'm only here for this.
Thank you.
Nadie está diciendo dónde estás.
Yeah.
Where a lot of our parents, what am I saying about labor? A lot of our parents' work hours are regulated strongly. Like you're here at las 8, you better be here until 5. So they can't volunteer. They can't go to the conferences. They can't be with you when they want to be with you because their work is until 5, or not, they're penalized. Or no les pagan. But to be here, be off in the summer, doing good work, feeling kind of respected, respected by the students, to me, the PhD was completely worth it. And I don't know if I would want to do anything else. So I always just tell students, be careful what you hear, but sometimes you get the information from sources that, they mean well, but they don't know because they've never done it. So I always encourage the PhDs, and I think it's an obligation to do it. And the picture that I just painted of political scientists at Berkeley, Stanford, and USF, that's not going to get better unless we get more students in that pipeline.
Yep.
And I think they're worthwhile careers. Like I wouldn't encourage the career on others if I thought it wasn't worthwhile, right? So, yeah, I think there's an obligation to have folks do this kind of work, and we're the largest racial group, ethnic or racial group in the country, and you have no representation. Eso me fascina.
Yeah.
And that conversation is not even a week old. I told my wife, nothing. I looked at the other schools and I'm like, no puedo creer. I can't believe it. So they come looking for a political scientist, they find Marco.
Yeah.
Right? So it's good and it's bad at the same time.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
You told us a little bit about why you chose to do your dissertation on that topic. Could you tell us a little bit more about the book?
Yeah. So I knew when I went to grad school, I wanted to I wanted to look at like race and Latinos in the military. I didn't know what the project would be, and then I started looking at. So think about the timeline. Isa, do you want to come stand with me real quick, babe? Yeah, come here. No, you're good right there. Okay. So you think about like after like when 9/11 happened, I was an undergrad at UCLA. I was taking summer school, and then the class was political violence when 9/11 happened. And then 9/11 happens, and if you've probably read, you know, the military in the U.S., they went into Afghanistan, they went into Iraq, and then those military conflicts lasted a long time. It's a lot more complicated than that, pero duraron mucho tiempo. And then what happened after 9/11, everybody got very patriotic because everybody wanted revenge, right? We're going to show these people that you don't do this to the United States. We're going to show these people that we don't, you know, you don't attack the U.S. and not get away with it. All those kind of vendettas of like how we manage foreign policy. And then a lot of people got very patriotic. Like there was lines outside the recruitment centers of people signing up for the military. But as people go to war and they start dying and it becomes difficult, la gente doesn't volunteer anymore. And then what was happening at that time when I was in grad school, the U.S. military, they started recruiting a lot more Latinos, right, to serve in the military. And I thought that was interesting, but I didn't have a project yet. So they're enlisting a lot of Latinos, like what's your research question,
Right.
What's the project? I had trouble anchoring the project. Like I didn't know where to center it. And then, you know, I would tell my advisor, you know, it's kind of como the example I have, you know, you have a picture and you want to hang it here, but I didn't have a nail. I didn't know cómo ponerlo.
Yeah.
Like I had this idea, but I hadn't know where to go with it. And I was interested in race and citizenship and the recruitment. And then my advisor goes, why don't you read about Afro-Americanos in the military?
No.
He's like, read about the citizenship, read about second-class citizenship, read about segregation, read about segregation, read about white supremacy, because a lot of that history is very ugly. You know, there's moments and there's pictures, believe it or not, of black soldiers coming home during World War I in their uniform, and they were lynched in the uniform. Increíble, right?
Yeah.
You go fight abroad for democracy, you come home in the military uniform, and then the mob, the mata.
Yeah.
So he's like, read that, get a theoretical understanding of it, look at the questions that they're asking, and then use that he goes, I know that's not your inquiry, but use that framework, right, to ask the questions about Latinos that you want to. So what he told me is that theoretically, I stuck the nail. Now you can ask your questions about Latinos and anchor the project. And then that's why you have to have advisors that know your work and like you and that you respect. And I thought that was brilliant. And I'm like, why didn't I think of that? Sometimes it's not just about Latinos, but think about the framework that you can plug in the questions you want to ask. So I was kind of evolving on the project, and then as the wars continued and Latinos came home, they came home with PTSD, they came home unable to readjust to civilian life. Y luego la gente no entiende, and I talked about this yesterday, war is very ugly, and we put soldiers in positions to do very horrible things. One of them is taking the life of other people, but a lot of them are borderline atrocities. Like women die, children die, atrocities are committed, and it's a lot of our soldiers doing it. So you think about coming home involved in those things, and you're supposed to go get a 9 to 5. How do people self-medicate when they have emotional and mental issues? Substance abuse, alcohol, drugs, otras cosas. So you had a lot of veterans coming home with these issues, and then they weren't citizens. Supposed to be, but they're not. They're green card holders. And then they get in trouble. Trivial cosas, right? Like that, and I'm just putting it out there that people in our family have done. Like DUI. DUI can trigger deportation.
Yeah.
The media makes it think the only people, even now, it's super loud right now, but now the only people that we deport are the real dangerous ones. It's not true. We deport people who make mistakes, like domestic violence, behind on their child support payments, got pulled over and got an attitude with the officer, and then they got resisting arrest. Right? These aren't people that are necessarily danger to public safety, but they were green card holders. So the point is that they come home and then they start getting deported. And I was reading about like deported veterans, como pasa eso? Because we claim to love the military. How many football games have you seen? The first thing they do, sacan la bandera, we salute the military, we thank them, the empty slogan, thank you for your service.
Here's your medal. And
Here's
then
your medal.
bye.
Y luego, the patriotism in the militarism of it, we can't start the football game until what? The F-16s fly over the stadium. So the military, we celebrate it. And luego then they're deporting the veterans. So to me, that became the project. And that's the thing with research. A veces the projects find you. And then I feel like, no, I have the project, like in this kind of tragedy of what's happening. It went from Latinos in the military to the actual like deportation. Y luego, the last thing I'll say is just to answer the question is, I remember talking about deported veterans and people were like, no, we don't do that. Like, what you mean we don't do it? No, los que no tienen papeles, they can't serve. They're not undocumented. They're legally have a right to go to school here and work here, and then they join the military. So people still think we do it. And then I always get a lot of pushback on like, no, we wouldn't do that. We wouldn't do that. Yeah, we do.
Because they don't want to accept that this is happening because like people love
Americans
and people
love
don't
the
see
military.
how the military incentivizes that.
Well, how do we
by
celebrate them and
providing
deport them? No, we wouldn't do that, and we still continue to do it.
Well, I mean, I think that's even evident in how we treat veterans that are citizens as well. But people just don't realize that this happens on another level that affects people who are legal residents as well. But that also brings me to ask you a question about these are like systemic injustices, right? And so what does that tell us kind of about the priorities of the military and how like these cross-national relationships like reflect these themes of state violence and just national violence, just an abuse of power?
Well, the thing that I'm trying to do in the book project and to answer that question is that this, and you essentially touched on it right now, is so, and I talked about contrasting with Afro-Americanos in the military. How is this unique to Latinos? How is their experience deviating from that of African-American veterans? It's the notion of illegality. And if to people, there's a theoretical explanation of what that is, but it is what's happening with Trump right now. It is the physical removal of a person from the nation state.
Yeah.
So it's one thing it's not justifying it. It's one thing to feel a second-class citizenship status. It's one thing to come back from Vietnam after you fought in a war and in the Deep South told, we're not going to serve you because you're African-American. Or you can watch the movie, but the colored side is this side and the white side is that side. Obviously, those are all injustices and wrong. Pero es otra cosa completely to take that individual, detain them, and then physically remove them from the country.
Yeah.
And muchos, when they get deported, they don't even speak Spanish.
Yeah.
Because they grew up here. So it's this notion of equality, and what I'm trying to argue in the book, it's like this notion of illegality, but that doesn't just explain when we remove them. You should see about when we recruit them, right? We recruit them for very racial reasons. We recruit them because we dangle citizenship in front of them and tell them, hey, if you're willing to serve, if you're willing to potentially go to war, if you're willing to kill for this nation, right, you'll become a full member. And a lot of the interviews I've done, they've told me that I was supposed to be a citizen. For a lot of reasons they weren't. But there's a notion of illegality and race trabajando juntos, even when they recruit them. Somebody told me that, or I read it, or somebody told me, it didn't happen to me personally, that they said Latinos make good soldiers, they make good Marines, they handle themselves really good in combat, as if ever, that's racialization, by the way, as if we were good at that kind of stuff. I don't know what that means. I'm Latino and I've never physically handled a weapon. I don't know if I'm good at combat. But why would that be only for a particular group of people? I read somewhere where they were saying, you know, y'all Latinos tienen that Aztec, you know, DNA, and that's racial.
Oh, wow.
That's completely racialized. But there were similar racial narratives for Afro-Americanos. And when they recruit the Latinos, they're essentially saying, you know, ustedes son, you're good Catholics, so you like authority, you handle yourself well in the military, it's good for you. That's a racial project, right? So then they enlist them under these like racial terms. And I've even read, even right now, everybody's anti-DEI. They don't know that some of the recruits that they recruit in the Southwest, their English is not their fluent language. Entienden un poquito, but mostly they speak Spanish. And then they have recruiters, they have drill sergeants, I should say, that train them in Spanish. So they do bilingual ed in the military because their main language. So we have a lot of our drill sergeants are Latinos. So they train them in Spanish until they're more fluent and pueden entender. So we do the military does DEI all the time. But there's a lot of racialization that happens. But the notion of illegality, I think, is part of like the state violence, right? And it utilizes them, right, to commit these atrocities. And then what's happening right now, like the foreign policy piece, if you look at like the way Trump, you know, and I know it's not about Trump, but if you look at the way he like negotiates with other world leaders, you know, going back and forth with China, it's peligroso.
Yeah.
You know, thinking about, do we do a preemptive strike on Iran because we suspect they have nuclear capabilities? And strategically, eso es importante, because once they're a nuclear power, the threat level is different. And what you want to do with other countries is that you want to prevent them from developing that capability. The reason I bring those things up, and they're foreign policy things that, you know, Trump's not doing a good job at, if there's military conflict, and if they require a U.S. military presence, meaning boots on the ground, they're going to be Latinos. Right now, the U.S. Marine Corps, which is mostly the first that get dispatched, 26% of the Marine Corps right now is Latino. What does that mean? 1 out of every 4 Marines is a Latino. So, you know, the government and the president and the White House, they can write the checks, but it's going to be Latino soldiers that are going to have to cash it. So, like, I see China and I see Iran and I see these other things, and first of all, you don't want war or military conflict. What worries me, lo que me preocupa, that it's going to be our families, our cousins, our folks that are going to be sent to go fight these wars. The same ones that they're telling, and the same ones they're telling to self-deport, the same ones that they're rounding up, right? There's a video yesterday with a woman who's from Guatemala, Massachusetts, that ICE came and broke all the windows on the car. The same ones that we're rounding up right now. Wait till there's a military conflict, and I guarantee you those deportations are going to stop, because they're like, we might need them for these conflicts. So there's a level of state violence. There's a connection to foreign policy, and most of the population thinks that we don't deport them, and they don't realize that a growing majority of soldiers are Latinos. Almost 30% of the Marines are Latinos. So it's just, so me preocupa for many reasons, but I think they're going to come to our community, and those are going to be the first ones that they want to send over there. Baby girl, watch your head.
Okay.
Is your iPad die? Oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's
For those who don't know, in Isa, right?
yeah.
Yeah, Isa, Professor Durazo, got his paper